Even if the hardcore of the Brexiteers still denies it, Brexit is an economic disaster for the British economy. This is because Brexit has resulted in more trade barriers, higher cost and less investment. A study by the Centre for Economic Policy Research has found that Brexit could shrink Britain's gross domestic product by up to 2.5% already by 2030. The study also found that Brexit could result in 1.3 million job losses. And Brexit has led to more trade barriers between the UK and the European Union. This is because the UK is now no longer part of the EU single market and the customs union. And this means that there are now tariffs and other barriers to trade when British companies trade with companies in the European Union. The higher trade barriers have resulted in higher costs for UK businesses. And this is because they now have to pay more for their imports from the European Union, and they now also have to bear the costs of complying with the new trade rules. And these trade barriers include tariffs, for example. Britain and the European Union have imposed tariffs on some goods traded between the two countries. And these tariffs can increase costs for UK companies trading with companies in the European Union. Restrictions on the free movement of goods is another issue here, because Great Britain and the European Union have introduced restrictions on the free movement of goods. These restrictions can make it more difficult for UK companies to export goods to and import goods from the European Union. And we must not forget the bureaucracy. And because Brexit has led to an increase in bureaucracy in dealing with trade between the UK and the EU. And this can slow trade between the two countries and definitely increases costs for British businesses. The barriers to trade created by Brexit have reduced trade between the UK and the European Union even. The drop in trade has had a number of negative effects on the UK economy, including lower economic growth, higher unemployment and higher prices. And Brexit has led indeed to a drop in trade between the UK and the European Union. Trade between the UK and the European Union has fallen by 15.6% since Brexit in 2020, according to the ONS, and that already was a drop of £124 billion. And the decline in trade has impacted all industries, but it has been particularly severe in automotive, engineering and chemicals. The drop in trade has had a number of negative consequences for the UK economy. Companies have cut production, cut jobs and postponed investments, and this has led to lower economic growth and higher unemployment in these sectors. They won't feel it because of the staff shortage, but it is. And the decline in trade has impacted all industries, but it has been particularly severe, as I said, in automotive, engineering and chemicals. And the drop in trade has had a number of negative effects for growth, and it's not only the growth and the unemployment in some areas, but also the higher prices. And higher costs have led to less investment in the UK. This is because companies are now less certain about investing in the UK, as they do not know what future trade relations with the European Union will be like in the long term. According to a study by the Centre for Economic Policy Research, foreign direct investment in the UK has fallen by 40% since Brexit, and that was a drop of 20 billion. And the fall in FDI has impacted all industries, but it has been also particularly severe in automotive, engineering and chemicals. I don't have to mention AstraZeneca now. The fall in FDI has had a number of negative consequences for the UK economy. Companies have cut production, cut jobs and postponed more investments. And if you just think about Nissan, for example, or about the city of Swindon, there a lot has happened. And Brexit has also caused the British pound to depreciate. And this has increased the costs of imports and pushed up prices for UK consumers and businesses. The fall in FDI and the devaluation of the pound have hurt the UK economy, and it will take years for the economy to recover from any impact of Brexit. The decline in investment has impacted all industries, as I said, but the negative consequences of a decline in investment plus the negative consequences of a depreciating pound compared to the US dollar, plus higher prices, that is definitely everything but win-win. And the drop in investment and the devaluation of the pound will hurt the British economy for several years to come. Because the depreciation of the pound makes British products more expensive for foreign companies and makes it more difficult for British companies to buy foreign products. And the devaluation of the pound also has led to the higher inflation rates in Great Britain than anywhere else in Europe. This means that the cost of living for UK households has increased. The devaluation of the pound is one of the negative consequences of Brexit for the British economy. The pound has depreciated by around 20% against the US dollar since Brexit, and this means that British products have become more expensive for foreign companies, and foreign products have not become cheaper for the British. The devaluation of the pound has had a number of negative consequences, and it has led to reduced trade, higher costs for businesses, and, as I said, higher inflation. And the devaluation of the pound has also resulted in a fall in the standard of living for British consumers. They now have to pay more for imports such as food, clothing, and petrol. And the devaluation of the pound is one of the biggest challenges for the British economy after Brexit, even if a lot of people still deny those consequences. And the devaluation of the pound has led also to this drop in trade between the UK and the EU. And the higher inflation that we still see, it's still higher than in continental Europe, is also pushed by this, because all the good prices that have to be imported has risen because of that. And if it would be just only the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, why is it so much higher than in the UK than, for example, here in Germany, with a comparable economy? But it is to a high extent Brexit that this is higher. But Brexit has also created uncertainty in the UK economy. And this is because it's not clear what trade relations with the EU will look like in the future. And this uncertainty has slowed investment and growth in the UK. So Brexit is indeed an economic disaster for the British economy. It has led to more trade barriers, higher costs, less investment, and this devaluation of the pound. And it has resulted in higher living costs for UK households and lower economic growth. And I know some of the trolls that are coming up with, what about this? What about this? What about this? No, it's not what about is somewhere else for a very short period of time. It's what happens in the long run, and what happened in the last years. And there you see the consequences. A lot was covered by the pandemic and the Ukraine war. But the difference between the UK and comparable countries, that clearly shows that Brexit plays quite a role here, even if about 30% of the population in Britain still don't want to believe it or don't want to admit that they made a mistake. But at some point you will have to make a deal with reality, to recognize reality. But and the trade deals the UK made so far outside the EU will not even bring a fraction back of what is lost. And I know are still denying that, but a lot of people at least have found their way to face reality and to face what is really happening, and that is fortunate. But the next general election is far away, and so far we don't see any alternative for the current status quo. And so Brexit will play a role in the UK for quite a long time, and for the relationship with the European Union. And it will stay a disaster for the British economy for quite some time. And if you want to know more about Brexit or other UK politics, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.